Mission Impossible may be a franchise that first began in 1966, but its popularity skyrocketed more thanks to the 1996 film featuring Tom Cruise of the same name. Naturally, there were video games made of the IP, like one on the NES, one on the N64 and later ported to the PS1, one on the Game Boy Color, and then nothing else until Atari and developer Paradigm Entertainment decided to create their own take on Mission Impossible, while being inspired by various sequences within the first two films. So, is Mission Impossible Operation Surma a mission you should choose to accept, or is it best letting it self-destruct in 5 seconds? Let's find out. The story of Operation Surma begins with Ethan scuba diving through a shipwreck to be then encountered by other IMF agents that provide him with his latest mission. This mission has him teaming up with Luther and Billy again from Mission Impossible 2, as well as new agents Jasmine Curry and George Spelvin. Ethan heads out to Bulgaria to meet his contact Mikhail Marcoux, who has information about the country's dictator Simon Algo's illegal operations. However, things naturally go wrong along the mission, and there are more involved in the overall scheme of things. It is at this point that Ethan and his crew must venture around the world to find out more about Algo's dealings, starting at the Los Muertos laboratories, where Ethan discovers a deadly neurotoxin being engineered here. Ethan will then run into Sofia Ivanescu, who ends up becoming a bigger part to the overall plot. Without diving into more than that, which would start entering spoiler territory, the story here is done well enough to carry the game from mission to mission. It's not the most engaging writing or storytelling, but rather it's a very serviceable one that accompanies the game well enough.
Gunmen come out of the woodwork, but that's not what worries me.
It's not?
Hold on. I'm routing some security footage to your remote camera viewer.
Now, Mission Impossible has always been a spy thriller property, so it's only natural to have the gameplay revolve close to that of stealth elements. To give you an idea of Operation Surma's gameplay, it's much like Splinter Cell with a bit more action and variety sprinkled in between. You will sneak your way through levels, completing various objectives, all while either staying out of sight or, if push comes to shove, taking out enemies. Objectives are typically highlighted on the heads-up display map, but you can also enlarge the map holding up on the D-pad to see more. Ethan has a variety of actions to assist along the way, like being able to crouch walk, hug walls, climb objects, shimmy along objects, roll, and use his fists to deal with enemies. Lighting plays a fairly big role too, as if you're in the dark, enemies will have a harder time spotting you. This is typically indicated on the top right of the HUD if you're in the shadows. When enemies are patrolling the area, you can approach them from behind and either knock them out instantly or grab them as a shield to knock them out afterwards. Ethan can also use the corner of a wall to knock out enemies instantly, pressing the A button as soon as the heads-up indicator shows that you can hit an approaching enemy that's unaware. There will be doors that require an enemy's handprint, and whether or not they are knocked out will not determine whether you can advance through that doorway if you need their handprint. You can grab them and move them a little bit easier, as opposed to having to pick them up if they're knocked out, which makes you move at a slower speed. Hiding the bodies after dealing with them is a pretty big part too, because if their bodies are spotted, someone will trigger the alarm. When the alarm is triggered, you will get roughly 30 seconds to find an alarm station to hack and disable it, which will have someone on the intercom announce that the threat's been neutralized and puts everyone at ease again. However, another aspect to note are the security cameras, in which if a body is laying in view of the camera, that will also trigger an alarm. Again, stealth is the key component. Thankfully though, most of the time, if you are caught, you can resort to any means necessary to defend yourself. There are just a select few sequences where if you are caught, it's a mission failure.
You blew our cover. Abort the mission. Repeat, abort the mission.
Ethan will be able to defend himself using his fists as well as various weaponry. Enemies typically go down between 3 to 5 hits, where you can do a 3-hit combo, a kick on the ground, and then a jumping punch attack to knock them out for the count. You can also run and do a jump kick at enemies. To make it more cinematic, running toward an enemy and holding the A button will initiate a slow-mo jump kick, and pressing and holding A again afterwards will let you do a slow-motion jumping punch attack when they're on the ground. It's a nice nod to the cinematic style of the Mission Impossible 2 film. The IMF will also provide Ethan with a slew of gadgets to use naturally as well. There's the Sonic Imager, which lets you scan through walls for any sounds to see if enemies are behind doorways. Then there are binoculars, which not only have the obvious use of looking further up ahead, but also lets you hear the audio of people talking that you're looking at, and also lets you take photos to send to Luther. Then there's the EWG, or the Electronic Warfare Gun. This is a multi-functioning weapon with 3 different uses. If you fire at objects and walls, it will fire a sound device that lures enemies toward it if you want to get the drop on them. You can also fire it at someone directly to plant a tracker on them to keep tabs with them on your radar. And lastly, if you fire it at a security camera, Luther will be able to hack it so that you can't be detected, and you can even remote into the camera to use for viewing using the remote control viewer. Additionally is the microcord, which you can use on any objects that Ethan can grab onto and shimmy along like pipes. There are more tools you'll get later on in the game that'll come in handy as well, like the Wasp, which is a drone that you can fly and also stun enemies with. Mission Impossible Operation Surma may be a stealth game at its core, but it does provide some exciting moments that change up the pace and provide nods to those first 2 films. Moments like using the microcord to rappel in a room full of lasers to try and avoid, while swinging back and forth to activate or acquire codes, or even destroying biochemicals like in the biolab scene from the Mission Impossible 2 film. Heck, there's even a sequence where you can skydive, and this was far before Mission Impossible Fallout did this stunt sequence. Even the action sequences that typically await towards the end of each full-scale mission are just fun to play out, no longer having to be stealthy and just firing away. The game does a good job of interweaving different gameplay elements between the stealth focus. However, even the stealth-based aspects feel pretty good, and the combination of all the mechanics here, while providing a bit of freedom with the gameplay, is blended nicely. I even like that certain objectives can be tackled in multiple ways, like this one here where you can either use the binoculars to catch the code on screen, but if you fail to do so, there's an alternate method to get those codes so that the mission continues. Then there are some intense sequences like this one here where you're sneaking your way through a live turret testing room. Occasionally, you'll need to also protect someone using a sniper pistol, which reminds me a bit of the train station mission from the N64 Mission Impossible game, but it feels more polished here. The missions are just well thought out and fun to play. Also, for good measure, there are actually a few boss fights here, but I do want to highlight the word few. They mostly result in taking cover and firing when the opportunity arises, but the final boss fight in particular is a bit more intriguing with the premise. I won't spoil it, but I am thankful that the game at least throws in a proper final boss fight to the entire campaign.
One more to go. Data transfer successful, Ethan.
As much as I enjoyed my time at Operation Surma, there were some gripes I had with the game as well. First off, the controls can be a little bit overly complicated. There are a good amount of button prompts involved to remember, like using the Z button paired with another button to initiate certain actions. Things like turning on the night vision goggles requires holding Z and then pressing the L trigger, while hugging a wall requires holding Z and pressing the X button, and you must do that combination again to detach from the wall, or you could also just press A to punch, which cancels the wall hug action as well. Additionally, hugging walls in this game does feel somewhat pointless, honestly. You can peek around corners, but the camera itself doesn't pan to show you more around that corner. You can't even aim around corners, and it just feels underutilized. Another gripe is that the game can be really dark at times, making you feel like you need to use the night vision goggles more than you'd like. You can adjust the brightness in the settings, but the game starts to look washed out at that point. The other element is that there's zero recoil with firing weapons, which looks a little bit odd in action. You also can't change the shoulder aiming, and it always resorts to aiming over the left shoulder rather than the right shoulder. In other games, you typically could change the shoulder aiming, or you could at least default to aiming over the right shoulder. In this one, it's interesting that it lets you default to only the left shoulder and occasionally lets you aim over the right shoulder. I even double checked the manual, and there's nothing there to show how to change shoulders manually. Another aspect is the trial and error gameplay at times that will result in a lot of unnecessary mission failures or deaths. And lastly, once the game is done, there's really not too much replay value here. Thankfully, you can replay any section from any mission, and there's also the impossible mode difficulty to tackle, but that's really about it. Visually, Mission Impossible Operation Surma is a very nice looking game for the most part. Character models are richly detailed with great texture work and solid animations. Ethan Hunt himself is obviously the most animated and detailed of the bunch, and while he looks nothing like Tom Cruise, I really like his look in this game. I do love the nods to Mission Impossible 2 though, with how Ethan animates when using the microcord and he can switch between modes of use for the grapple, or even detaching from the cable entirely, and it's the exact animations Tom Cruise did in the second film, doing the flips off the cord. Or even the slow motion jump kick and slow motion jump punch that feel right out of John Woo's style in MI2. That attention to detail to me is very awesome. And I know I might be in the minority, but I actually absolutely love Mission Impossible 2, so seeing those nods here is a bonus for me. Environments also have nice detailed texture work combined with strong lighting. Sometimes the game is too dark though, like I mentioned, and you'll find yourself resorting to those night vision goggles more than you should, but when it's not like that, you can really take in the work that the devs put into the visual environments. Even this mission here in the middle of a thunderstorm, where the skybox is dark and atmospheric, yet looks far richer than it has any right to be. The frame rate does usually sit at about 30 frames a second, but there are instances where that does dip and it even chugs a bit depending on what's happening. It's not too often, but it's a shame when it does occur. The one animation I thought was comical initially was when firing weapons. You only see the barrel pull back when firing, yet Ethan's arm is as steady as possible. On the other hand, Ethan is an extraordinary secret agent, so I suppose we can chalk it up to his nature. But yeah, otherwise, Mission Impossible Operation Surma is one of the nicer looking GameCube games that impressed me many times throughout. In terms of audio, Operation Surma has a fairly strong package here. The soundtrack matches the game well, whether sneaking around with atmospheric music, to the music ramping up when caught and then entering action, to even having remixes of the Mission Impossible theme. Speaking of which, the theme in the main menu for this game is super badass. I've literally sat in the main menu for 15 minutes just to listen to the song on repeat. Sound effects fit the game well with powerful gunshots, impactful punch effects, and techie sounds when you're using the various gadgets. Voice acting is also done well, with Ving Rhames reprising his role as Luther, but Ethan on the other hand is actually voiced by Steve Blum. And I will say, hearing Steve Blum as Ethan Hunt took a while to get used to, as he sounds, well, like Steve Blum.
All right, if that's the way you want it, but from here on out, I call the shots, you understand?
But while he sounds far more gruff than I'd expect Ethan to sound, it grew on me and then I rarely thought to myself about the odd sounding choice. The dialogue is all delivered well enough and it helps make it feel like Mission Impossible.
I've got another one disarmed, Luther.
Okay, let's go to the next one. Hurry, Ethan.
Mission Impossible Operation Surma may be essentially like Splinter Cell Lite, but in some ways it's more fun thanks to the action being less punishing and more badass. The story isn't as engaging as I would have liked, but the visuals are strong, the soundtrack is really good, and the gameplay strikes a nice balance of stealth and action. It's crazy to think that this was the final Mission Impossible game to ever release, despite how many more movies we'd received. If you're a Mission Impossible fan or even stealth action gaming fan, I wholeheartedly recommend picking up Operation Surma as it hooked me in fairly quickly, and I always wanted to come back and continue the game when I wasn't playing it, and that's always a positive sign of a game. Paradigm Entertainment understood the assignment here and they executed it well. Additionally, shout out to my GCG Nation enthusiasts, Local S'mores Pop-Tart, Retro Wolf, Alejandro Mendoza, Julio Cesar Garcia Zamora 34, and Daniel Herrera for further supporting the channel. If you really enjoy the content and are interested in further supporting the channel, click that join button and for $2 a month, you'll get early access to videos, membership shoutouts and videos, and exclusive icons that I made that go next to your username when commenting. I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all in the next episode, GCG Nation.